The great question is, how will we go through the time that we are living in, proving ourselves as good disciples of Christ? Now, I don't know your history. I was born a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm now 57 years old, and I was from childhood growing up with the idea that Jesus is coming very soon. Now that we are really living in this time, we need to know what is that, what counts. Jesus told his disciples before he left them in John 13, he says, "A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another." Now, whenever I read this verses, I was wondering, why did Jesus say, "By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another"? It looks like he says that if among the Christians, or among those who confess Christ's name, there should be something visible among them that is different than among the world. So the way we, as I could say, a group, show up in between us, we prove if we are the disciples of Christ or not. So it's not in that sense the love to the world, to love to the enemy. It is love among one to another, among the brethren. This is something that would show to the world that we are Christ's disciples. Now, do we really have love among each other or not? If a stranger looks to us, would he see that we know what love is? Or would he say, well, you are like all others. You are also like us, hating those who hate you, agreeing with those who agree you, loving those who love you, but not being able to love those who have another opinion, or those who have another way of seeing things and doing things. So what would it be to go into a group? And what would this group show? What is love? Now, of course, we are individuals, and each one needs to exercise that what he knows. But if all the individuals in the group that are together are led by Christ's love, then of course something would be visible and different. Now we all stand in the conflict between Christ and Satan, and there is just one subject. And I like the idea that things can be reduced to one thing. Yes, when Jesus met the rich young rulers, he said, "There is one thing thou lackest." And what was that one thing? When Martha came to Jesus and she said, he should intervene so that Mary should also help her in the duties, Jesus says, there is one thing that matters. There's one thing, and Mary chose the right one. So what is that one subject that is so important? I hope you all guessed it. What is love? And there are the one that says love is altruism, that's Christ, and Satan. Now, when we look to the words, they look very similar. I mean, very different. Selfishness and love, one might think, is easily to be distinguished, but not so in real life. In real life, if we take altruism and selfishness, it will be very hard to distinguish because they look so similar. And I took the analogy of money. So if you have original money and false money, how would you see the difference? Because if the difference would be obvious, like it would be there, you could say, oh, this is obvious different than this. But if you have two that are almost similar, how can you know what is what? And I believe there are many, many ideas that are different about love, but sounds very similar. So today, in the time we live, in the crisis we live, it is a habit to say that save yourself and save your neighbor. That is, wear your mask or whatever it is there, or keep distance, because you want to do neighbor. Hands with your patient, and some of them just are afraid to give you their hands. They keep distant. Now, of course, as a physician, I have to touch them when I'm looking to their ears, or so they cannot really run away from me. But is love touching, or is love not touching? How does it? What is the right thing to do? What is it? Do we know how to behave today? So, without God's law, we would not know what love is. We could not know the difference between love and selfishness. And I think in this crisis today, we see that that's not easy to see. So Romans 13 helps us. Owe no man anything but to love one another. For he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. For this, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to its neighbor, therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. Now, it's very clear, if love is the fulfilling of the law, we cannot separate the law and love. Now, as a person that is grown up in Adventist, the law and the doctrines were always very central. We were educated to argue about this and that doctrine, and we were very, I could say, grown up in a legalistic way, but love was not there. We were fighting among each other who knows things better, We have competitive Bible games, so to say, who knows better what's written in the Bible. But I cannot remember I experienced love among the people in the church as I was grown up and even later. So obviously there must be something strange happening in our minds, that on the onside we say we are the children of the law, but on the other hand, we don't love. And if we don't love, then we cannot fulfill the law, because love is the fulfilling of the law. So obviously we have not understood the law. That's why we don't know what love is. That's why I put and my presentations basically under the title, The Law of Life, because I want to share the law, because without the law, we can never know what love is, because love is exactly the fulfilling of the law. So the whole universe is governed by one basic law, since everything was created to function as a channel. And altruism means that nothing can exist or function by itself. It is in need of power and means. And the other side of the law is nothing can do anything for itself. That's why it takes in order to give. So as simple as these things are, they are very deep, and they are concluding everything together. So if a person thinks that he drinks water for himself, then he is in deception, because no one can drink water for himself, because the body where he puts the water in is not his. This glass doesn't take the water for itself, it takes it in order to give it. And so everything that God has created is in the image of his unselfishness, in the image of altruism. You take from one side, you need to take it because it's your need, but it is in order to give it further. Now, we speak here about love. As we as humans have a spirit, we need to take love from God in order to share it with our neighbors. So this is very unknown to us, and I've seen this in my practice. Everyone wants love, but everyone wants love for himself. Everyone thinks that love is for him. Now, especially in the females, love is a big theme. And so when I ask a woman if she is in lack of love, she will always say yes. But how does she interpret that lack of love? Is it that she doesn't love enough, or is it that she is not loved enough? So usually, in the way we think, we believe a lack of love is when others do not love us. But according to the law, you have a lack of love then when you don't love the other. That means you take love, but you want to keep it for yourself, not in order to give it. I once was in Asia in a school. I've had many students, and over 700, and they were sitting the girls on one side and the boys on the other side. So I asked the girls if they are in need of love, and they said yes. And then I asked them, for whom do you need the love? And then, of course, ones who thinks, yes, from a deceptive way will say, well, I need love for myself. But as we will see in the definition of love, there is no way to have love for yourself. But today, this is a very common idea among Christians. You must love yourself first before you can love the other. Now, yes, I must take love before I can give it. But the love I take is not for me, but for the other side. That's why I said to the girls, yes, you need love, but in order to give it to the boys on the other side. Usually, we think the opposite way. That's why we are in a terrible deception as we are born with our selfish nature that concentrates itself only on itself and does everything for itself. So the law shows to us that we cannot exist or function by ourselves. And I think that's quite easy for us to understand. But to do nothing for yourself, that's very hard for us to understand. That was hard for the rich young ruler who came to Christ and said, what am I missing? And what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said, keep the commandment. And he said, which ones? And then Jesus showed him the commandments from the giving side. And he said, all this I have done from my youth. And then Jesus says to him, go and give everything you have to the poor and come and follow me. Why could the rich young ruler not give everything? Because he was not aware that he was made to keep nothing for himself. So there is nothing in nature, if we look to our body, there is nothing that a cell or an organ in our body does anything for itself. The liver doesn't take the food for itself. The heart doesn't take the blood for itself. The lung does not take the oxygen.
You want to do
itself.
some music with Talki?
Pardon? Okay. So nothing does anything for itself. So only the human heart is the opposite way. Everything is for itself. So John 15, Jesus says, this is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. And I like this idea, as I have loved you. So he gave them an example what perfect love is. And he says, greater love hath no man than this, that the man lay down his life for his friends. So in this our day, to lay down your life for others is not an easy thing, because we are all in the scareness, or most of the world is in fear of a virus or something that can be transmitted, they believe, from their friends. And so we are not willing to give our lives for our friends. We lose our friends in this time of crisis. I have a good friend, he's a pastor, and we disagree in how we see the things. Now, as friends, you can remain friends even if you have disagreements. But if you want to push your own idea upon the other, then your friendships goes apart. If you fear your friend, how can you come together? And Jesus says, Greater love has no man than this, that he may lay down his life for his friends. A daughter of a old man who was with fever and coughing, and it didn't look well for him. His daughter visited him with two face masks, one over the other, and gloves, so not to be detained by her father's skin or anything. Is that love? Did Jesus come into this world to fear, to touch us? It says, no greater love hath no man than this, that the man lay down his life for his friends. But today we're not even willing to, become sick for our friends. Now Jesus says, you should love as I have loved you. And for me, he is the example of what love is. So he has that first thing in love is 100% freedom for the other. Now, if something is hard for the selfish heart of man, it is to give freedom to the other. I'm speaking daily with my patient, and the issue why they are sick is because they cannot give freedom to their child, to their husband, to their wife, or whoever they are loving, they say, because they want the good for them. Now, in this crisis, people are separated by ideas. The one wants the vaccine, the other not. And so who really loves? Who is the one that loves? It is the one that gives freedom to the other. I spoke today with a sister from the church. She's 75 years old, and she doesn't like that her husband watches certain programs on TV. Now, that's okay. We can disagree. But we found out that if she could, she would not allow her husband to watch what he wants on TV. Is that love? Of course, she wants his good, so to say, but in the moment she forces the other one, she behaves or she proves that she's connected to Satan. The greatest issue that is in this universe is freedom. The devil, by deception, wants to impose to others his own ideas, so there is no freedom for the other in the devil's reign. Jesus never went against the freedom. He gave freedom when the people came to him from that village and said, please don't come through our village because you bring disagreement between people and unpeace. So please don't come through our village. Go by side of our village. The disciples got very angry and they wanted to let fire fall from the heaven just to destroy those people because they were not, they did not want Jesus to pass through. And Jesus said to his disciples, you don't know whose child spirit you are. So they were in the spirit of the devil because they wanted to enforce to let Jesus go through that village. But Jesus respected, he gave freedom to them and went another way. And he taught his disciples a very precious lesson. Jesus gave freedom to Judas Iscariot to kill himself. Jesus gave freedom to the devil to test Peter and to show to Peter what was really in his heart by denying his Lord. Jesus was the perfect example. He never compelled anyone to do anything good. We never find him do that. But in our lives, among us, today, you cannot go even to church if you don't comply with certain conditions, which takes away your freedom. We are in a world in which the opposite of love is just reigning among, not the world, but among the people in the church, and we don't even recognize it. Now, to give freedom for others also is to give 100% respect for the others. Now, the definition of respect in a selfish way would say, oh, I want you to do my will. If you respect me, you do this. That is conditioning, that's not respect. Respect means that I leave you free to do what you want, but it's not respect to do the will of another. But people say, oh, if you respect me, do this. No, I don't do that, what you want, because that's not respect. Respect means I leave you to do what you want. Never one could make Jesus to do his will, that is, among humans. Whenever Jesus was in a conflict that humans wanted something from him and it was not in the will of the Father, he did the will of the Father. When the disciples one morning came to him and said, oh, come, the people in Capernaum are waiting for you, he was out in nature praying. He said, no, I want to turn back to the people that are waiting for me. I go because I must go to the other cities as well. So he respected the will, but he did not follow it. So those are the two main things in love on the one side, and on the other side, love has maximum interest. It gives also life for the others. So love, as we will go through the definition in 1 Corinthians 13, has maximum interest for the others. And it does not even think to itself. So let's look to the definition of love from 1 Corinthians 13:4. Love is long-suffering. That means gives total freedom to the other. When we can give freedom to the other to do the evil, then we are love, because you need long-suffering for the evil, not for the good. So love can allow the evil. Selfishness cannot allow the evil. Love can suffer unrighteousness. Selfishness cannot suffer unrighteousness. You see that where it's so obvious when we are having our eyes open. I see in my patients that they say, well, that I cannot suffer. And the things that is in the world now, the unrighteousness that we experience, they say, I cannot endure them. I had yesterday a young girl, she was 13 years old, almost 14, and she had a lot of issues in her body. And she says this whole things in the school, what I have to do with mask and testing and all this stuff, is just wearing her down. Yes, why are they wearing her down? Because the girl's nature cannot suffer unrighteousness. Now, of course, no one has taught that to her. But as a Christian, we who know God, we must know what long suffering means. Long suffering means I let the evil happen. That a selfish person cannot do. That's why we have all this conflicts, because we cannot think to let go our children to do the evil, to do that what is wrong. We must enforce the good. So where is then love among us? So love is long-suffering. It's total freedom to the other. So Paul has understood the definition. And then he says it's kind and full of goodness. That is, even sacrifices his life. You see, that's why Jesus says no one has greater love than that he gives his life for his friend. But we are not, he sacrificed his life, not only his health, but we are not willing even to sacrifice our health to save a person or to be full of goodness to them, because we must prepare, or we must conserve ourselves. We must, conserve ourselves, protect ourselves before the others. Well, if you have to protect yourself from your brother who is maybe sick or not sick, then there is no love in existence there. So you see, in 2 words, Paul has concluded what love is. Love is long-suffering, and you only can be long-suffering when you give freedom. You are full of goodness and kind when you can sacrifice your life, when you don't need to protect yourself in front of your brother. There's no way. Jesus not even protected himself when the demon-possessed people from the lake in Nazareth run towards him. The disciple disappeared. He was standing alone with this crazy man, and he was not afraid. Now you could say, well, that is Jesus. Well, Jesus was the man like us, and he was tempted like us. He could have fear from these guys who run with, has even the chains they broke. It was a terrible sight. The disciples fled, but Jesus stayed because he was willing to give his life if it would be for the Father's sake. He was sleeping in the boat when there was a big storm, because he would not care about himself. He would know that he is in the care and the security of his Father. He knew nothing could happen to him what the Father would not allow. So he had no fear, neither from demons nor from humans. He had no fear from the storm. He could rest because he came to give his life, not to preserve it. So 1 Corinthians 13 also gives us a overview of what love does not do. And I like this because you see, sometimes when you take the negative, you are more able to understand what love is. So what love does not do? Love is not envious. So That's the 10th commandment. Love does not go after that what your brother or your sister has. There is no envy, no in love. Love wanteth not itself. So love is not, uh, it does not make itself higher than the others, is not puffed up. I mean, you see, he tries in different words to explain the same situation in which each one would force the other one to do his will. You know, the one that is proud, he wants that um, he should be seen or what great things he can do for the other one. And the other is envies the, I don't know, wife or whatever. So you see, love does not do those things. Love does not behave unseemly. So there is a behavior in love that is always nice, respectful, taking care. And then love seeketh not her own. Now let's just take the idea that um, you have to protect yourself from your neighbor, which is a total opposite of what love is. You never seek your own in love. But I have so many, even Christian patients, couples who have their difficulties in their marriage relationships because everyone searches its own. When we would seek the will of God, then if both seek the will of God, then we would come together and we would do in partnership the will of God. But selfish nature, the way we are born, we are always seeking our own. And where there is fear, there is no love. So love is not easily provoked. That's right. It suffers all things. Love thinketh no evil. That is, it does not remember the evil to bring it up again and tell the other what it is. And love rejoices not in iniquity, but love rejoices in truth. There's one thing love does also not. Love never faileth. Love has no end. I like this the best because that's why God is love. From him, everything comes out and everything comes back to him as a fruit, and it goes. And so love has no end. He who exercises love will never die. So there are four things in which love is all powerful. It beareth all things. It believeth all things. It hopeth all things. And it endureth all things. Now, in these four things, the Apostle Paul has put all the powers of love. And if you look to them, the only way to endure all things is to give freedom for things to happen. In order to go through difficult times, it is you hopeth always that God is present and will keep you. And you bear all things because you do not need to change things for your own self. So let's look to a few of those things that selfishness does in order to discern that a little bit from love. The most obvious behavior of selfishness that looks most likely like love. Now, one of them is the selfish person thinks the other is responsible for him. And this is a great issue. Is health the responsible of another one or of myself? And I tell my patient and also who asked me, I said, when I can eat and drink and think for the other individual, then I am a danger for him to make him sick. But as long as I cannot eat or drink or think for him, I can never be an issue for him to be sick. It's impossible. Because those things only the individual can exercise. But now selfishness says, oh, others are responsible for me. And of course, on the other side, he takes responsibility for what his neighbor does. Especially parents say, well, I'm responsible for what my child does. Never ever. The parent and the child are two individuals. The parent is responsible for what it shows and teaches the child. But what the child does with what the parent teach is not the parent's responsibility. You see, this is where the idea comes that God is responsible for sin. God is responsible that sin exists. No, God is responsible that he let sin exist. For that, he is responsible because he could have made it and destroyed it. But he is love. So as love, he let sin exist. So that sin shows itself, and he shows that he's not responsible for sin. So the first thing, he thinks the other is responsible for him are usually the children. They have expectations from their parents. Almost all issues, also in health, are there because children think their parents owe them love. This week I had a patient, she's 45 years old, and she had some, from her childhood, skin issues, among others. And she came because no one could help her. She's now 45, over the last years to know why she had the skin issues. So I asked her one important question. I said, how many responsibilities or duties do parents have toward their children? Because she was the child, obviously, and the answer I said to her is none. You see, she could not really believe that first, but then I said, how many duties does God have towards you? And that's an easy question to answer. I never found one who said, well, God has a duty towards me. So they say none. She said, then the parents cannot have any duties towards their children. Children have duties towards their parents. The parents have duties towards God, but not the other way around. But you see, selfishness says, my parents are responsible for what I have now. There was a patient who was 40 years old and he was very fearful. I could hardly look into his ears because he was afraid. And I asked him, I said, why are you so afraid? And he said, because my parents didn't love me. So if others are responsible for what I do or not, for what I think or not, if I'm sick or not, then we are in total darkness and in total selfishness. Because then we are on the throne and others need to serve us. Others are the issue. Never others are the issue. Our own deceptive nature is always the issue. So the most obvious behaviors of selfishness is he thinks the other is responsible for him. I hope you put this away from your life, ever blaming someone that he's responsible for your suffering. And then he takes responsibility for what his neighbor does. Is a wife responsible if the husband betrays her? Some people may say yes, but that's deception. No one can at any time be responsible for what the neighbor does or not. So he is the unit of measurement. A selfish person will always put itself as a unit. As I do it, you shall also do it. If I wear a mask, you have also to do it. If I go like this, you have to do this also like this. We can never put ourselves to be the unit of measurements for others. He is afraid of his neighbor. Now, can you ever love one you're afraid of? Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. That means the same interest that you have for yourself, have for your neighbor. The crisis through which we go now for a year and something shows that we believe our neighbor is a danger for us only by his existing. So if we are afraid of our neighbors, then we must know we don't have love. Then the greatest issue in life is that we want to enforce the good on others. Our selfish nature so much wants to rule that it is so happy to take over the rulership if you give him a good reason. Just have a good reason and you become a dictator. And unfortunately, this shows up in our churches in a terrible way in these days. We are forcing others to do what we think is good. Yes, we have good arguments, but nevertheless, if Jesus ever showed that he enforces anything on others for the good, then let us follow his example. I did not see once. I see in him the opposite. I see that he respects his neighbor even though the neighbor hits him hits him in his face, or like the one spew Jesus in the face, and Jesus allowed it. Jesus did not force anyone for the good. So, conditionings. You see, life is through the law, we are conditioned. We cannot exist by ourselves. We need power. We need means in order to exist. And God must keep us in our existence. So we are on conditions. Life has conditions. But conditioning is evil. So if you condition your child to say, first you eat this and then you eat that, that's conditioning. Or if you say, if you do this, you get that, that's conditioning. Such a thing is not in love. That's the opposite of love. It's one of the most terrible things that people are conditioning each others. So God does never do that. You never find him. Then selfishness must control the others. Now, God is in control of all things, but he never controls. So we want to control what the other does or not. But we need to control the other because we are afraid of him, because we think he has something to take away from us. So wherever there is control, wherever we want to control the other, we are in selfishness, not in love. No matter what good reason we have, there's never controls. There is no way in which one should control the other. And one of those evil things that we see today coming up more and more, and it will get even worse, is he denounces him. So how should it ever be that there should be denunciation among us? Well, it's one of those deep, sad things that happen in our churches today. And Jesus said the brethren will denounce each other and will be the greatest enemies. And the time we live now in, it just shows that you cannot go in a church and be free today, that no one would denounce you because you don't comply with the conditions. And then threatening. You never find threatening in love. So when you threaten another person, then you know for sure you're not in love. I might read from 1 Peter chapter 2. Where it says, "Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward. For this is thankworthy if a man for conscience toward God endure grief, suffering wrongfully." Now see, it's not that you are subject to your master to do the master's will, but you are not angry with him. You don't go against him. Yes. For if a man for conscience toward God endure grief, suffering wrongfully, that's a thankworthy thing. Yes, I'm not there yet where will enjoy to be suffering for Christ. Like Paul said, he's happy when he has to suffer for Christ. But certainly we will experience this very, very fast, that we will be suffering for not even doing nothing, because today we are like the people, we are just a danger because we're existing. So for what glory is it if when ye be buffed for your faults, ye shall take it patiently? But if when ye do well and suffer for it, ye take it patiently, this is acceptable with God. So I want to come to the example of Jesus that says, "For even hereunto were you called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth." That is, he fulfilled the law. He always was love. Who, when he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judges righteously. So I hope we can understand the deep things of love. Love doesn't threaten. Love is kind. It even gives life before it threatens the other. Selfishness will avoid its neighbor if he does not smell good or anything else. Selfishness will judge and condemn him. And selfishness will show favoritism and discrimination. That's also something that happens today in an amazing way. How, for a good reason, we show favoritism for the one and discriminate the other. So the crisis we're living in is putting us all in a sifting process. God will not prove us or will not sift us with something else than with the ability to love. It's only the ability to love that will show up. It will not be doctrines. It will not be theological ideas. It will be simply the way we treat each other that will decide our final destiny. And that's the little things. Jesus says, he who gives a glass of water to his neighbor has given it to me. But today it's dangerous to drink from the same glass or even to give a glass to a neighbor. It might be contaminated. In John 1, 1 John 4, God says, beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. Now, as the Bible warns us from the last days in which we live, that there will be, because of unrighteousness growing, love will get cold among the brethren. I hope we become aware of the danger we are in. I hope we can see through the very deceptive way things are put into the world today. The devil knows what love is, and he knows how to deceive us with something that looks like love. Yes, you must give yourself an injection in order to show love to your neighbor. Looks like giving your life for the other, doesn't it? So if we don't know the law, if we don't know what is right and wrong, if we don't know what brings health or what brings disease, if we don't know how these things are, how will we stand in these last days? Love is the center of all things because it's a thought process. But obviously this is not in our focus. It's not in the physician's focus to understand the way humans think. And it's not in the theologian's focus to understand how a human being thinketh. We are just putting on a road in which we say, this is good, and we must put all people to do this. And we're not aware of how deceptive that is. So may God help us to understand what is love and be able to give us clear discernment and be not deceived to think we are loving while we're not loving. Love does not come out by meditation before. If we have it, if Christ lives in us, it will come out in all the things we do. And the tests will only show what is there. Because out of the heart are the issues of life. And in provocation, it is really seen. If we would not be provoked, we would not see ourselves. Because that what comes out comes from the heart. And if love is in the heart, then we are willing to let go of everything. We do not even need to live for ourselves. Because we know love sacrifices everything. So I hope that we are going to look into our mirrors and see ourselves where we are and prove it. And there is one simple test that you can test yourself. Whenever you are under pressure, whenever you are angry because you want something good and others don't do it, then you know you must be wrong. Whenever you cannot endure the evil, then you know you're not in love. Whenever unrighteousness is done unto you and you cannot suffer it, then you know you're not in love. If anyone does anything and you cannot love him because of what he does, then you are not in love. So this must be something that we very fast recognize our issues and run to Christ in order to change that. May God help us. Amen.